The idea is to talk about the NEC document, the Works Information Document, which comes from the NEC contract. Now, the NEC contract was developed at the time when they built the tunnel between England and France. And the nice thing about this document is that it is fair to all parties. It's not like the JBCC and other documents which actually biased only to one party. But this is much more fair. And the main thing about it is it's all about information. And the information must be ready when the contract starts. So you don't, nowadays, you actually design as they build. And then there's not proper coordination and you end up in a lot of problems always. Now, just to go back to the NEC document, it was, as I said, for that tunnel, and they asked for tenders for that tunnel, and Van der Merwe also tendered for the tunnel. So they said to him, his price was the cheapest, how is he going to do it, what method is he going to use? He said, no, I'm going to start with one group of people that's going to dig the tunnel from England and the other one from France. And he said, now who are you going to use? He said, no, there are so many miners that they haven't got work and he's going to use them because they used to tunneling and so on. So they said, that's nice. And he said, but now what will happen if the two don't meet in the middle? He said, well, then you get two tunnels for the price of one. And I don't know why, but the Van der Merwe didn't get the contract. But to come back to the NEC document, the one basic principle is that the day when you start, you hand over all the information to the contractor. Not bits by bits by bits and pieces and design as you go on. It must be all handed over complete, and then if you make changes, then it's quite a process and you fix the payments as you go on, so that at the end of the day, when the contract is finished, then you've got the total cost and it's all done and over with. So let us just go back to this. So the background, in the olden days, it was common practice to write all the specifications and instructions and information on the drawings. And I think many people still do that. And when you do that, this information, these notes are all over the drawing. And the poor contractor in site must now make sense of that and try to put them together and work from that. Now, this information was then issued to the QS, who would include what he or she deems necessary in the bill of quantities and leave out some important information. So all that information that is on the drawing, that drawing with the information now goes to the QS. That's now if you talk about buildings. But the same goes for other projects as well. And what then happens is that you find that the QS works very selective and only put in to the bill of quantities what they want. And then eventually some very important information gets lost. It is difficult for the contractor to hunt for information if it is on various drawings and to manage and plan and do his work. So it becomes very difficult for him to program his work and do his work and so on. And to plan it and to remember this note and remember that note and so on. In the olden days, we had large drawings. It was A0 drawings. So if you draw a drawing of a manhole, it's on an A0 drawing. I don't know why it was done, but that's how it happened in those days. So for the details, which was also clumsy to handle, and it was a problem on site. So you walk around with this big drawing to try and sort out how to build a manhole, or how to install a drain, or any detail and so on. So then what happens, we produced new details for new projects, which was time consuming and costly. So what we did is every time those drawings were redrawn for every new project. So it takes a lot of time that was spent on that, just on details. When I was involved with Sasol 2 and 3, the Americans, it was a big contractor, Fluor. They were responsible for the construction, but they also were involved in the design and information. And what they had is that they've got all the details on small, even A5 format little booklets with a special number and so on, and it's all standard details. So they developed quite a set of detailed drawings of everything. So if you want to build a boiler and construct it and install it, then all those drawings were in that format, which is a standard detail with a standard number. So what we did, we then went and took our drawings, and I tore them up and cut them up into pieces and reduced them and made a set of A4 drawings. And that was the beginning of standard detail drawings. And a lot of other contractors, consulting engineers also used this method, and it grew and grew and so on. And then one day, somebody came to me and wanted me to help him with information. And when he opened his documentation, there was my drawings with my title block, everything on it. So he pinched it and he didn't even take the title block off. But I don't mind, because it is information that we share with other engineers, and that is important, that we make sure that we all work on the same standard, so that the contractor, if we all, I mean, why do we have to have everyone a different detail of a manual? A manual's a manual. Why don't we just have a standard detail and everybody use it? These handy booklets contain every possible detail which you could select, the ones that you are that are relevant, and compile a booklet in each. So if you've got standard drawings and you've got a big file of them, now this was now before computers, then you could select what you want and put them in a document and issue that. And that immediately made the life for the contractor and the plumber and the carpenter and whoever much easier, because now he's got everything in one little booklet, and it's easy to print it and to issue it to everybody who needs it. So that was one big step ahead and forward. The system saved massive time costs and held up in every possible dispute and saved our name time and again. Now that point, you must now concentrate on that. That's very important. We had this past week, we had another case where we have done the works information document, and we were accused of not giving the right information, and we said, listen, let's have a look, get the works information document, and we opened it, and all the relevant information was in there. So that is the only place where you, as the engineer, have got the opportunity to use your pen, which is now called a computer, and to write your specifications and what you want, how the work must be constructed. And that's very, very important. There are standard details which are common to almost all projects, which can be used over and over. There are specific project-related details which later become standard details. So the moment when you have to develop a new detail, then you give it a new number. Or if you've got to take an existing drawing and you've got to change it, then you don't change that drawing, you keep that one, but you make another one with a change on it, and you give it a new number. So that helps you now to build up a set of standard detail drawings with specifications and notes, and you save a lot of time, and that's so important, because time is expensive, and with this you can actually really save a lot of time. There are many standard specifications which can be used over and over, And this is also a huge time saving and cost saving. If you take, for instance, a specification of a pump system, there are only certain elements that change. For instance, the suction head or the head of the pump, that might change. But the specification of the pump and the system, that can stay constant. So it's just easy to take an existing specification and just change what you have to change. It is very important that the contractor know how the building or system was designed, as it will assist him with the construction engineering. Okay, there's two elements that I always propagate, and that is that there is design engineering and construction engineering, and there's a difference between those two. And it is so important that you make sure that the contractor provides the construction engineering, and you, the engineer, you provide the design engineering. But those two must match. So it's so important that when you design something, to make sure that it is constructable. Because in many cases, people design something, but the contractor, it is not possible for him to construct it. And that's very important to make sure of that. Design engineering is not based on mathematical calculations. And this I want to emphasize, and I want you to take it with you in your future career, because you are still young, you've still got a lot of work to do ahead of you before you can go on pension. I've been working now for 66 years, so I think I've come to a point where I think I can now hand over to you younger people. But this you must always remember, is that engineering is not based on mathematical calculations. It is based on assumptions which become decisions. This is the basis of engineering, and which are related to a degree of comfort and which are related to cost. And that is a process that you have to go through with your client or his representative or her representative. We must be very careful about this his and her, otherwise you can get into trouble. Okay, so just to explain that, for instance, if you take a water pipe and there are, say, 50 connections, taps on that pipe, then you must make an assumption of how many of those taps are going to be all opened at the same time, because that will determine the size of that pipe, of the supply pipe. If you say that they must all be able to open at the same time, then the pipe is quite big, because now it must carry enough water for all the taps to be used at the same time. But if you decide that it's only half of them that will be used at the same time, then it's a much smaller pipe. So, and that relates to cost. So the smaller the pipe, the less cost it will be. But also the level of comfort. So if you allow only for 10 taps to be opened at the same time, and 20 people open it, then the comfort will not be the same, because you will not get the same quantity of water at every tap. So that is a process. And if you take it, for instance, a road, there's no mathematical calculation that will tell you that road must be there where it is now. That was an assumption that there's a need for a road, and then it became a decision that there shall be a road. Then the next question was, what level of comfort? Will it be a gravel road, or will it be a concrete road? Whatever it is, and it's different costs. So that's a process. So what I'm saying to the designer, please don't make decisions on behalf of the owner. And that's what sometimes goes wrong, where people make assumptions and decisions without the client. And then eventually the client don't get what he thought he is going to get. So this is a process to go through to make sure that the client knows what he's going to get. and then he will know what is the level of comfort, and he will know what is the cost. So you cannot go through this process and end up with the cost of a bicycle, but you want to go and buy a motor car with that. And that's what I find that sometimes our quantity surveyor friends don't understand that. They want to try and cut the cost. But they don't understand that if you cut the cost, you also cut the level of comfort. And you also will cut into the expectations of the client. So this process is so important. You'll understand now why I'm emphasizing this. Discuss an example. From this process, you will have all the information to do the design, and it will be what the client expects. So eventually, once you've gone through that process, now you can do your mathematical calculations. And now you can design the road. And now you can design the pipe. Because now you've gone through that process, and the client is part and parcel of it, and he knows exactly what he's going to get. And that's so important. Even for instance, the selection of pipes or the piping material, it's so critically important to take that through the process with the client, so that the client don't get a surprise. So when he gets there, he thought he was going to get metal pipes, and now you've given him plastic pipes. He must be part and parcel of that process. And I find that in many projects, that connection with the owner has not been made. And he does not know what he's going to get. And then later on, if something goes wrong, then you're the culprit, then you are in trouble. So this document is also to try and get you out of a problem, but also to make sure that everything is on record. Okay. The cost will relate to the level of comfort decided and agreed upon and satisfy the customer expectations, and it is all on record. So this is all part and parcel what you are going to put into the works information document, so that it can be signed off, and that in the end, nobody have got any illusions, and they know exactly what they're going to get. It's important to get the owner to sign this document off, as it is the basis of your design. So this is important. If you don't get him to sign off, then they will turn around and say, look, we were not part of it. But this is a very important part, where you make sure that the client or his representative sign for that, so that he cannot turn away later on and say, listen, I didn't know what I was going to get. Okay. The design engineering section must not only contain the design assumptions, but also the decisions such as design standards to be used. So this is, when you get to fire and water and mechanical, there are so many different standards that you can use to design. And this is important, that there is a decision made which standard you are going to use. Now later on I will go through it. I've got a horrible organigram that we can go through. You can just see how all the institutional bodies fit into each other. And people think that an SABS standard is compulsory. And it's not compulsory, unless it has also been promulgated as a regulation. And we'll come to that later on. So just remember that many people use an SABS standard as something, as a regulation, as you shall. It's not. You as an engineer can use any other suitable standard as well. And especially in the built environment, like air conditioning and hot water systems and so on. You can use any other suitable standard. You must just make sure that it has been agreed with a client, so that they know what you are going to use. Pipe materials. Okay, I'm just listing a few things. You can apply this whole principle to what you are doing. But pipe materials, it's so critically important, because I always say that as an engineer, we don't make pipes, we don't sell pipes. We don't even install pipes. what is important for us is that round hole where the water or whatever goes through. The size of that's for us important. And that we calculate. But piping materials is something that causes huge problems. I know that here with this company also there were cases where somebody sells pipes and he tells you how wonderful this piping is, and then after that, we start getting pipes that crack and pinholes and all kinds of weird and wonderful things, and then eventually, what happens? The client comes to you. Now you, Mr. Engineer, you were responsible. But what we've done there is to make sure that we specify everything that we don't want to happen to a pipe, and to make sure that the manufacturer is also a partner in the whole process. Now that is very important, and I've done that on all my projects. I make the manufacturer a partner and responsible. So on that I will require that the manufacturer shall come to site and check with the contractor, with a plumber or whoever, to make sure that that person who's going to do the installation knows how to install his piping. Because there are so many types of piping and so many ways to connect it and install it and support it, all of that. And if you don't do it according to what they want, and something goes wrong, then they say, yeah, but you didn't follow my requirements. So that portion is extremely important, to make sure that you've covered everything and to make sure that it won't come back to you. And also to ask for the guarantees and things like that. And then what I also do is you can go and ask all the manufacturers. For some other people they won't do it, but they've done it for me on every project, and that is that I insist that he come to site first thing before the contractor start, to make sure that the artisans that's going to install it knows how to do it. That's the first thing. Then the second thing is I insist that the manufacturer's representative will come to site when 25% of the piping has been installed and check it and give us a certificate and say, we are satisfied with the workmanship. Because every time when something goes wrong with a pipe, then they say it is the workmanship. Now, it's not possible to say that, because now the manufacturer sent his representative to come and do an inspection. Then at 50% and at 75%, and then on completion. So at the end of the project, the manufacturer gives us all the guarantees and all the certificates, and he is satisfied that the piping has been installed according to all his requirements, and that he will give a guarantee. Now, if you don't do that, then you have got a problem. And this has saved us time and again, I cannot tell you how many times. Then the plumber comes to us and say, how do I do this and how do I do that? Then we say, read the works information document. Then he goes back and he reads it and he finds all the information there. And that has even come to the point where the plumber comes and says, how do I do this or that? And then he says, read the works information document, and he walks away. So they've learned the lesson. And what I found in the first instances, that the plumbers take my works information document and use it on other projects of other engineers, but I don't care, that's fine. Then the equipment, that's also very important. The specialist work items. Now, if you take in the building services, the specialist items are the hot water generation and the pumping systems and all things like that. That's all important. And that is a separate section in the works information document. And there you specify the performance, everything that you want it to do, so that the contractor or the supplier or the manufacturer know what you want, and they can give you an appropriate tender and say, this what we give you will be able to do what you want. The second part contains the construction engineering information. This section contains all the information that the contractor needs to do his work. For instance, with the NEC document, you must tell the contractor that there is a water tank that is so big and it weighs so much, and that you must lift it up and you must put it on top of the roof of a 30-story building. So now it's not just that in the bill of quantities there's just an item, but apart from that, you now tell him exactly what to do, and now he knows that he must get the cranes or whatever to get the tank on top of the roof. That's just maybe a stupid example, but it's so important because it's information that the builder has now got, and he knows exactly what to do. Okay. It contains a full description and scope of his works. So that's important. So it's just not a list of items and materials that he must put a price to, but you always give him a full description of what he must do exactly, and you also give him how it must do, what standard, how he must test it. All of that information is all in that document. So that makes this document a formidable piece of information, and which is on record and which covers you. So nobody can say now, you didn't tell me how to do this, and you didn't tell me how to test it and what to do. Okay, it contains product descriptions and specifications. That's also important. Now, I always say, don't specify a specific pipe, but you can refer to a specific product and say, or similar approved. So that also opens the market, because what happens is in many cases, the manufacturer go to the architect or somebody else and say, use this and use that and use that equipment. And then the other people that have got wonderful equipment, they don't have the opportunity to also tender. But this now opens it also. So it's also in the interest of the client that you open it up so that, but you must give him some idea of the quality that you want. That is important. So that's why you can use a product and say, I want something similar to that. And that is important. Okay. It contains a references to the relevant standard. We've spoken about that, but this is where you put all that information. It contains standard details. So it's all part of that. It contains special details. It contains all the notes and instructions. So now you put all the notes and all the instructions into that document. So the contractor don't have to now go and hunt it all over and bring it together. He's got it all numerically, the one after the other, and he knows exactly, where to find it. It just makes the life for the poor guy so much easier. It contains, the most important is a quality assurance system. Now, the moment when you talk to a QS about a quality assurance system, then he thinks you must do it. It's not your duty. Quality assurance is a very, very important element, and what is important of it is that it is a process, and the process has got milestones. So the contractor must do his work and he must check it himself. Then somebody else must come and check him, because if you write an exam and you must give yourself marks, you will get 150% every time. And that's what will happen if they do their own inspection. So I always insist that somebody else who is not involved with the work itself must come and do inspections. And at certain intervals, milestones, and make sure that it has been pressure tested, that it has been checked and all things like that. It's so important. We had a case where there was some very upmarket flats that was built, and all the copper pipes were cut and put together, and it was Friday afternoon, and the plumber just went home because there wasn't now time to solder all those joints. And Monday morning, everybody forget about it, or that guy didn't come to work, I don't know. So all the pipes were just put together and not soldered. And in that case, the clever architect didn't allow any access into the duct. So now this is 3 stories high. So now you've got to find a little plumber, put a rope around his neck and drop him from the top down to now start soldering all those pipes. So, but they only found that out after the persons moved into this flat. Now, he paid something like 5 million rand for this. You see, you've got flats and apartments. I can afford a flat, and you can afford an apartment. There's a big difference in cost between the two, you see. So this was an apartment, not a flat. So this guy was sitting in his lounge, and he had one of this, long white fluffy hair carpets. Beautiful. And he was sitting there, and there was a little bit of water squirting out of the wall. And he thought, well, he doesn't like that. I don't know why, but he didn't like it. And it was wetting his carpet. So eventually they found out that that whole space of that duct was filled up with water. So now they had to come and punch a hole through the wall, run over his white fluffy carpet with a wheelbarrow, up and down, and get somebody in there to fix that. The simple thing was, if they followed the works information document and the quality assurance system, then they would have found out that it was not pressure tested. And now, I don't know, we deal a lot with plumbers, and a plumber thinks that a pressure test is when you open the municipal water, and if the pipe doesn't leak, then it's fine. The document says very, very clearly, and this is where you state it in your works information document, if you use SANS 10252 Part 1, then you shall pressure test the piping to a certain pressure, and it must be signed off. So if more than one person has checked it as per your QA system, then this would not have happened. So in any discipline of engineering, it's so important that you give a quality assurance system in your works information document. But what you do say is that this is an example of such a system. And this is important because the contractor must come with his own system. And then you can say, fine. But you must also understand that contractually, it's not your duty to do quality assurance inspections. Your duty is to make sure that it is applied. Please remember this, because sometimes you get bullied into it that you become responsible for the inspections, and you are not. There are cases, I can give you a copy of it, where the architect and the engineer did an inspection on a project, and later on a part of the structure collapsed. So this went eventually to court, and the contractor said yes, but the engineer and the architect inspected it, so they are responsible, and approved it. And the outcome was, Mr. Builder, you built it, it's your mistake, you are responsible. So just don't take the blame. And on site, just one good advice, never take any blame. Don't accept any blame. Be kind and calm and everything, but don't accept a claim, because you are not allowed to do that in terms of the PI insurance. It is their work to go and sort that out. What you can promise is that you'll sort it out, but you don't take any responsibility. That is, otherwise, if you've done that, then it means you've already lost the court case. So never, ever do that. It contains all testing requirements, and this is important, because if you see, it's so important that if you've left that to the QS to put it in the bill of quantities, they will not do it. I found that so many years, because they think now the contractor is going to charge for that. Of course he must charge for that, because it's work that he must do. And the QSs don't understand that. So it must be an item. And it must be covered. But if they didn't put it in the bill of quantities, then you've got it here. You specify here what must be tested and how it must be tested. So that is critically important. It contains completion requirements. That's also important. Once the project is finished, you just don't walk off. There's a whole process of how to hand over, the work, and how to train the people that's going to do the maintenance. And the training, I always say training of the facilities management is not a demonstration of how it works. It's training. It's taking the people through a course and to make sure in the end that they do know what to do, which valves to open, which ones to close, what to do. That's so critically important. But then that must all be specified, and the only place where you can put it, instead of a note on a drawing, you put it in this document. Okay, it contains all certification and guarantee requirements. Now what I always say is that we had it this week, where the client wants now the guarantee from us. We said, no, read the works information document. The only person that can get a guarantee is when the person that goes and buy material. If you go and buy a car, then you will get a guarantee. If I go and buy a car for you, then I get a guarantee for you, which I hand over to you. And that is important to understand. But this must all be in your document, so the client understands that and knows exactly that you are not responsible. Okay, and the final completion certificate and as-built requirements. As-built requirements is also so important because in so many cases you find on a new job and there are no as-built drawings, especially when you get to water, because people don't take water drawings to the council. So we sit in a water predicament in South Africa, but there are no drawings for water of buildings. This building also haven't got any drawings for water. So how can you do maintenance if you haven't got that? And this is a problem since 1977. And I'll later explain to you what has happened is that I've started with a document in the 1970s, which was a design document for water systems, which was then taken through some plumbers through the Department of Water Affairs and promulgated as regulations under the Water Act. But it's not applied under the Building Regulations Act. It is the same. You see, in the previous government, they tell the police to go and arrest a crocodile. Then they go to the nearest stream and they find in Afrikaans it's called a likewaan. I don't know what's it called in English. What is it? It's also a likewaan, but it's a small version of a crocodile, and then they hit him until he admits he's a crocodile, and then they arrest him. And that's what they've done with this document. They have hit it until it accepted that it was a regulation. But it is not a regulation under the Building Regulations Act. So that's the kind of thing that you have to cover in your document. Now you've got to refer to that document and say, thou shalt work according to it. So you make it on your project, you make it compulsory. And so you'll find with electrical and with mechanical, there are many similar cases. So that's important. The final certification includes certificates from all suppliers and specialist contractors. Now, this is important. Just as an example, in a building, I specify that the manufacturer that supplied all the taps shall come to site and service them and certify that it is correct, that there's nothing wrong with it, and that's now guaranteed for, normally it is like 5 years or something like that. So that is important. Cover yourself, electrical as well, mechanical as well. Make sure that you make the manufacturer responsible for what he makes. Otherwise, you become responsible for what he made. And that's wrong. So the only place where you can cover yourself and make sure that the responsibility is put with a responsible party, and that you can put in your document. So it shows you how mighty your pen can be. Okay, then the final certification, then the final training of the facilities management. So often this is neglected, and it is just a once-off, just walk through, do this, do that, do that, do that. And in our specification, in our works information document, we specify that it must be a proper training with proper information, with proper documentation. And what you find that in many cases, the contractor comes and he grabs some catalogs and put them together and put it into a box file and hand that over to you. And that's not good enough. What they must do is to specify exactly what you must do, when you must do it. And that's important. Because if you don't do that maintenance, then you will forfeit your guarantee. And then it comes back to you, and you become responsible, and it makes your life difficult. So this makes your life much easier. However, it also makes sure that you are not made responsible for what you are not supposed to be responsible. The role of the suppliers. It contains in detail the role of the suppliers and their certification. That you must make very, very sure. Because this is the one item where you can really get into deep, deep trouble. I can tell you there are projects here where certain piping has been used, and all the piping for quite a few million rand had all to be replaced. And that was because of failure of material and things like that. So it is so critical important that you spend a lot of time on that. Then this other item, the kick-off meeting. We've got an agenda for the kick-off meeting. I think you'll find it in your documentation. And maybe we can look for it and send it to everybody. But we developed that because the main thing is what happens is that the contractor will come and say, yeah, but we never saw the works information document. Because the person that was responsible, you know, a contract takes a few years sometimes, and then what happens is in the meantime, the person that was at the kick-off meeting disappears and is gone. So if you don't have a record of that kick-off meeting and what was decided there, then it becomes your problem. And what happens is that in that kick-off meeting, what is important, you must insist. That's a meeting that you are the chairperson, and the contractor must be there. That's now the main contractor. His subcontractor must be there. The quantity surveyor must be there. Their QA officer must be there. And who else you want there to be there shall be there. And then what you do, you discuss with them the whole design, how it was designed, the norms that you used. So you work through that works information document with them. And that's all put on record. So that one day, if something goes wrong, then you have got proof that there was such a meeting and that all this was discussed. So it is really, really a powerful, powerful document that saves the company and your name and a lot of money. So that is critically important. Is there anything? Okay, the table of contents is then, the first thing is the design philosophy. So the design philosophy is actually all the information of how you've designed it, how it's going to work. That is very important. So you give a whole description of that. Then it's a description of the works. Then all the information in terms of the design engineering. Then operation and control. And like for that operation and control, you'll find that there's an item where it says that the specialist pump person, contractor, must go to site and go and see where he's going to install all of this equipment. Where is the water connection? Where is the hot water connection that he must connect onto? Where is the electrical supply point? What are the sizes so that he can fit it in there? That is extremely important. So to have that. Otherwise, the contractor comes back and say, you know, I can't fit, you know, the equipment in there, and I've got such and such a problem. So make sure that he visits the site, he signs off that he's happy, that he's got all his information, and that he can do it, and that it must be coordinated with the rest of the installation. So that is important. Product specifications go in there, notes, standard details, technical info, pumping and hot water systems, contractors, completion certificate, and qualifications. That's also very important, is to state the qualifications of the contractor that you want. Because quite often nowadays, you know, even if you look at heat pumps, the guy that come and install the heat pump at your house or in a building, he used to have a dairy or something like that, and it failed, and now he's a heat pump specialist. So this is important to make sure of that. And the building regulations talk about a competent person. Guarantee certificates and COCs from all suppliers and so this is all in there. Then the quality assurance control system and records, as-built information and drawings, and the final COC. So that is basically what is in there. I just wanted to give a general thing so that all the sections maybe think of it, and we've got examples of such works information documents, and what we've done, and it saves such a lot of time for all the items that we've spoken about now. It's all there. There's a format, but all the changeable elements are all in red. So all that you do, once you become, you know, au fait with the document, is so easy. You open it up, you change all the red, and you put all your information out, and then instead of taking weeks to do such a document, you do it in one day or in the afternoon, and it saves you time. And also, you cannot make mistakes now, because all the mistakes has been sorted out, and you've got a standard document that you can use.